And it's Dan and James talking about the Villa games. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the AVFC Faithful Podcast. We are finally back, and this week we have a bumper episode for you. We are Dan squared this week. We've got James as always, and we've got Dan Pritchard with us. Dan, James, how are you both doing?
Yeah, we're great. Yeah, really good. Hoping that the weather stays around, and also looking forward to what I reckon might be a busy July in the window.
Yeah, I'm doing pretty well as well. I'm actually kind of glad that the early business and PSR stuff is over and done with now. So now I can watch the Euros and purely think about that rather than checking Twitter every couple of hours and be like, oh, there's some new financial chicanery going on.
Yeah, well, I think we all became sort of amateur accountants for the past month or two, didn't we? I think we all knew it was going to be a bit of a close one, and I don't know if too many of us got too panicky, but I know it got a bit nervy as soon as we started hearing the old the fines coming our way and possible penalties, and then obviously I think how long did we speak about it, James? And it's no surprise that Douglas Luiz was the one going. I guess we can sort of start there with Douglas Luiz almost probably inevitably leaving the club. It's not been confirmed as of right now. Please correct me if I'm wrong. I clearly missed the Maatsen news before we recorded, so we'll get onto him as well. But I want to sort of first talk about the outgoings in the major one, which is Douglas Luiz. I'm interested to hear what you both think about that, because it was should we say inevitable?
Yeah, I'd say so. You know my view on it was that I think that he's a top class player. A lot of play went through him in those central areas, but I didn't think he was irreplaceable as such. And when he stocks that high as well, in a position that you're in, for me, it always felt like he was going to go, even with the Jacob Ramsey sort of rumours. I think for more than one reason with Ramsey, I think you can get a lot more out of him when he's fully fit, and obviously he's homegrown. I think there's way more value to get from him in a year or two, possibly, if that was the case. But I'd like to be thinking about obviously building with Ramsey in mind in the squad for a few years to come. But yeah, I said, didn't know. I think just after January, I said I still thought Luiz would go in the summer. So yeah.
Yeah. My feelings were pretty much the same. I felt it was always between Ramsey and Luiz, because quite frankly, those were the two players with financial upside on them that also were replaceable in some way. And I think we've already done, we'll get onto it, but I think we've already done a fair bit to replace what Luiz was giving us. And it's pretty sad to see him go on. But if you do believe reports, he's had a contract sitting on his desk for a good while now. So now kind of seems like the right time to cash in.
Yeah, it's going to come to this point for a lot of players, isn't it? For us as well. I mean, it's very rare you get. This isn't the sport of dynasties, really, where you get the same team with the exact same squad going for so long. And I actually think it's quite a testament to his quality as well. He actually did stick around for as long as he did, because he looked very much exit door as well at the start of Gerrard's reign, particularly. So it's never going to be enjoyable watching him go, but I think he's done us a favor with those last few weeks of the season, because it's not like he went out, finished so high, storming the pitch, and you're like, oh, we're missing that. I think everyone now is seeing that and go, oh, well, it feels like you're not missing much, which obviously you are. Let's not be silly. He was a fantastic player for us, and he's just an enjoyable character to have around as well. I'm interested to see, obviously, I like to imagine us talking about the squad with a Kamara fix. I feel like it's hard to sort of analyse Douglas Luiz particularly without him having his best partner there. Sort of unfair to him almost. But I just thinking back, is what there do we miss that we're actually desperate to replace that he brings is what I'm more thinking of. Because is it more a partner to Kamara that we're losing, or is it more of Douglas Luiz's individual quality that we're losing?
Bit of column A, bit of column B. We saw in the last part of the season, without that defensive partner there, Luiz was a lot more limited. But his primary purpose in the team is to pass the ball, to progress it by passing, to keep possession by passing, recycle possession, and he also has quite a good impact in the final third. He's fairly handy defensively, if not an outright lone six. But the primary role I felt was that of a passer, and we can't get into the guys coming in, but that's very much what Maatsen is, or what was at Dortmund. Berenachea comes in, who it looks a bit more Kamara-like, but again is a on ball is more of a passer than a dribbler. And then you've also got Barkley coming in. I'm sure that'll probably be announced July 1st when that's all said and done after the PSR deadline. But that was basically his role for Luton. He did it doesn't, when you go on a site like FBref and it shows you the kind of all your columns and what percentile the players in, but Barkley doesn't look like he stands out that much. But you gotta remember, he playing for a Luton side that did not have much of the ball, and he was doing a lot of their ball progression, a lot of their possession recycling. He wasn't getting into the final third that much. I'm not sure he quite has that mobility to stay deep and get into the box anymore. But that was a lot of what he was doing. I actually think he'll play quite a few more minutes than a lot of Villa fans might think he will. When he was first coming in, I think everyone was looking at him as he'll be a good squad player. But I can see him maybe playing a bit more than that. I think it depends on. I believe we might get one more midfielder, and we see who that is and what sort of minutes he gets at the end of the season. But it wouldn't surprise me if it was like 2,000, 3,000 minutes.
Yeah, I think Barkley will be really handy, because whether he becomes important more in the league or whether it's important more in Champions League, but still a handy rotation of squad player. Yeah, I think he's going to be a lot better than his first stint at Villa. And I think his first stint at Villa was in a strange time anyway, when you think there was no fans. He had his injury worries. And also it was the time when Jack was still here, and we were basically a one-man team. And when Jack was out, you're looking for one person to take the mantle. And him being a 10, I think a lot of fans expected him to produce more than he did, which, his form wasn't great at the end of his spell, his last spell here. But we've seen at Luton this season, when he's part of a decent sort of structure, and he should come into one that's even more solid, what he can do. I think his experience and the traits that he brings will be really handy for us. And then looking at that Berenachea, it's like, I've seen quite a few people on Twitter call him like when you want Rodri and your mum says you got Rodri at home. You know what I mean? Like, he's got that sort of, he understands space is how I can most describe him, I think, whether that's on or off the ball. Because I haven't seen a lot of him, so it's judging on clips, but the thing that I noticed most was he knew when to not be in the way when the team are in possession, and he sort of knew how to snuff out danger when, we're trying to win the ball back. So I think over the next 2 or 3 seasons, it'll be really interesting to see how he progresses, because I don't think he's going to be someone that we bring in and we send him out on loan. I think he's going to be here to help out. So, and then as you were touching on Maatsen, I think really handy player to have in terms of on the ball, whether he's higher up on the left or whether you want him drifting a little bit more inside at times. It depends what our plan is, but he's that sort of passy fullback, which I think when it comes to, especially with deep build-up, we sort of struggled if we had to shift it out wide and then back in. Whereas I think Maatsen helps out a lot with that. So, I think, and not to forget, he's now an asset already in the future with the potential that he has. So, it's I think business so far is looking pretty strong.
Yeah, and you touched on like one of the big things going into the window that I thought we needed to address, like we saw in the back half of the season, when teams started setting up specifically for us, and rather than going against us with their kind of standard setup, they would just flood the midfield, and it made us incredibly reliant on Pau Torres' hero ball to progress the ball, because we could only really progress it through the middle. It's not Digne's game to progress the ball. He very much receives in the final third. It's never really been Cash's game, or Cons has done a pretty good job this season, but our wide options very much were, none of them were really ball progressors, and that was something I really felt that we needed to add. And in Maatsen, we've kind of found that. Yeah, pretty for a left back, it's a pretty steep price, but you can, it's kind of a little bit how the cookie crumbles. Like, he wanted to go back to Dortmund. Villa probably need to put just a little sweetener in the pot for Chelsea to go, oh, okay, we'll move him on to you then, and we'll take Kellyman, who I'm also pretty sad to lose, but it's not the first time that Chelsea have overpaid for an Aston Villa attacking midfielder with very few senior minutes.
Yeah,
very very much playing but yeah, Todd Bowley's little financial game there, and I think we've played it pretty well.
Yeah, that's a strange one though, isn't it? I think it's funny. I think once, at least probably every 6 or 7 episodes, Chukwuemeka somehow comes up, but that was a strange one. I think that one was different to Kellyman, because obviously that was a lot of contract issues, and it seemed like a breakdown between club and player, and it looked like it was naturally coming to an end. Obviously, came completely out of the blue to us. I know Jacob Tanswell mentioned that he'd heard of it and didn't want it to be true, and before he went on his break. So that is a strange loss. I think what I wanted to touch on with Maatsen coming in, unless I've missed something, which is very likely, because again, I missed us signing a player today, so I could miss anything when it comes to Villa somehow. But who makes way at left back? Because I don't see us having. Which obviously I know he played Moreno further forwards a couple of times this season, coming off the bench, particularly obviously when Ramsey was injured. I'm just interested. I can't see us going into the season with Moreno, Digne, and Maatsen.
Yeah, it's a good question, because we also, we've not touched on Illing Jr. yet, and my general belief on him is that at least if we kind of stick to a similar system that we did last year with the left back quite high and wide, then Illing Jr. kind of ends up as a left back. So yeah, we've got some bad contracts to shift, almost exclusively from the Gerrard era of Saints. Digne's on a lot of money, and you paid a pretty significant fee for him as well. And what he does now is he receives in the final third and he crosses the ball, and he does some other things well, but you kind of I felt like this season, and he had a pretty good season, was like milking that last bit of football out of him. Like, you could see he wasn't really able to overlap anymore. He placed himself quite high and wide up the pitch. He can't move up and down as fluently as he used to. So if you can get someone to take that contract, and really you're kind of keeping your fingers crossed that the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia decides, okay, we're gonna go into the market again, which no one seemingly knows at this point, then yeah, unless you can get someone to take that bad contract, and we've got a few that we need to shift, then it probably ends up being Moreno. At this point, I say Moreno. I hope it's Digne. Like, not that I dislike Digne. I just think it's a bad contract.
Yeah.
That's what I've been saying quite a lot recently, that as much as I like a lot of what Digne can add in the final third, and his numbers have been all right this season. One, I think athletically he doesn't fit in now with the distance that he has to cover if he's playing that high and wide role. I think there's a couple of times I've seen this season where the ball gets overturned and he's ambling back, and I think that's not. I mean, it is his fault, but it's also not his game. That's not really what he's about. And I think both of our fullbacks as well, which I'm not sure how much Maatsen improves in that area, but when it comes to dealing with back post, then neither of them have been great this season anyway. But yeah, and then there's been rumours, I think, I don't know if I read this a few weeks ago, that Moreno was looking to go back to Spain. So it's really tough. And I wonder if there's a world where you do bring in, obviously, Ealing Jr., and both of them could go, whether that's too much of an overhaul or not, or whether you'd be looking at another left back, maybe a different type of left back in that sense. I wouldn't be surprised to see both of them go, but if, I was looking to get rid of just one, it would be Dean because of that contract. It is ludicrous what he was put on when he was brought in, really, and it would help shifting that, and especially shifting Coutinho's wage as well.
Yeah, and the other, in terms of the bad contract list, Diego Carlos, unfortunately, pretty good 1v1 defender, has shown himself to be kind of lacking in the air, but he's also 30, 31 now.
Yeah.
Pretty high wage, pretty high fee. So there's a fair bit of squad cost tied up in him. There's a fair bit of squad cost tied up in Dendoncker. So those are, and like sometimes contracts can be bad because it was good at the time and players get injured. Like we're paying Kamara a lot of money, and you're kind of hoping hope he comes back the player that he was. Otherwise, that could be a bad contract that we're sitting on for like the next 3 years. But those contracts we gave out during Gerrard's era, like with the exception of Kamara, are almost exclusively bad contracts with a decent fee and a pretty high wage for a 28-year-old professional, which on the face of it adds to your squad. But it's basically, that's been the United problem of the last few years. If you buy a 28-year-old, put them on a lot of wages, then you're going to have to eat those wages for the next 4 or 5 years. And we don't have Manchester United income.
No, clearly. It's also, it got me thinking that actually, because, we now if we're just counting on what we've got directly on the books now, we've got 3 certified left backs. We've got 2 right backs with the young Czech, or I hope he's Czech. Serbian. Thank you. Well, you can blame me for anything. And then we've also got Kesler Hayden still on the books. And we've got Sosa from Arsenal, who we loaned out to Plymouth last season. So that's already, you're looking at arguably about 7 fullbacks on the books.
Yeah, we got Ben Cresceni as well.
Yeah, it's I mean, unless we're playing some wacky formation, which it wouldn't be completely surprising under anything under Emery, but that's an interesting summer as well, considering that a lot of people have their feelings about Cash, a lot of people have their feelings about Kesler Hayden as well, to be fair. It just seems like there's going to be a lot more. It felt like there wasn't actually going to be a lot of outgoings at the start, because you forget these players sort of exist almost, and you think, oh no, we don't want to lose Bailey, or we don't want to lose Ramsey, or we don't want to lose Rodgers. But then you forget, oh no, you've got King Kesler Hayden, you've got Ben Cresceni, like you've just mentioned there, who completely skipped my mind. It's good, and that was just a side note, but you've really made me want to talk about Diego Carlos now, because that was quite a big point at the end of the season. It was the game at home against Lille, which when I went to, I was in the unfortunate position of when we were defending, I was in the Trinity and I had a direct line to our back line, and he was very hard to watch that game. I think he had a real poor game. He's an interesting one. I think you mentioned his poor contract, but we're not really in for anyone that would sort of suit his replacement, and it doesn't seem like throughout the whole of the season that Emery wanted to play with two left-footed centre halves. It's very, very rare he played Pau Torres and Longley. Interested to see what goes on there because he does seem to like Konza at the right.
Yeah, I can see Konza playing a lot of right back next season, especially in Champions League fixtures. I think Emery quite likes him there. His on-ball profile has improved so much under Emery. But yeah, you kind of, I don't want to say like Diego Carlos has been he's a very up and down player depending on who you're playing. Like absolute man of the match against Arsenal, nothing got past him. It's a tough 1v1 defender in a squad that has 3, now maybe 4 like specialist defenders, like players that I would look at and go, your job is defending. Like that's Kamara, it's Konza, and last season, now we've got Berenche in and Carlos. So it's a difficult thing to say. You're going to have to lose one of those players, but yeah, aerially it was, and touched on Maatsen there. Maatsen, I think, won like 9 headers the entire season he played with Dortmund. So he's not a back post header guy. So then you have, in the back three structure, you have like Powell there, who, he has to take his position from Carlos. And it happened quite a few times in the back half of the season where you see Powell between 2 players because Carlos is also deciding his between 2 players and not positioned himself correctly. So maybe Pau Torres is better in the air than we think he is. But I think he's the one that's going to have to be defending those back posts a lot of the time, and then you get if you can get someone to take the back contract, which maybe you can. There's rumors that AC Milan are kind of interested in him. He might suit Serie A a bit better than he does the Premier League. He certainly suited the Liga more than he does the Premier League. There's fewer aerials that he's going to have to win. There's more teams that are going to quite happily pass it around on the ground where he's really quite comfortable. So yeah, we've not really been linked to any right-footed centre backs. I think it's a case, but I think Jacob Townswell did report that like if we can get someone to take him, we'd be quite open to offers. And yeah, that's kind of ideally like right-footed centre back be like the top priority in the summer. But with PSR the way it is, you can only really get one in if you shift, £100,000 a week worth of Diego Carlos off to someone else.
Yeah, definitely. I would like to, I'll throw a name in there that I do like myself that covers, I think versatility is like quite a big thing for us as well, because it can help you adapt in a shape if you need to, or whether you just need to change personnel due to injury or rotation or whatever. But in a world of if you could shift Carlos, if you see Chelsea bringing in another centre-back and you know that they're rumoured to be accepting bids for Chalobah, I wouldn't mind seeing him come in because he can play that right-back role, centre-back role. And I think that Konsa can... I'd play Konsa more central then. I think he always seemed to have a good partnership with Pau. I think that their line always seemed to be a lot more solid, and I think that athleticism that he has, I think slightly better than Carlos, would be beneficial in that central area. But again, it just depends what the plan is going forward. I've been saying this, like we can try and guess what we're going to do shape-wise next season. The philosophy is going to stay the same. We know that. We want to be a bit more dominant, which does take practice more often, and also the personnel. You need the right personnel in general. Like, there is only so much you can squeeze out of the players. So it is going forward. It's a process. So it just depends on what we do want to do this season. I've seen a lot of shouts of whether we play a 3-4-3 type, which basically is just basically what we're doing now on the ball, but it just makes it more simple to drop into the defensive shape. Obviously, then using wing backs as your width, but then it depends what you do with other players further forward. Then it's so hard to call. And I think what we do in the market's going to dictate that. But then even then, it can start the season. You can either have injuries or what you're planning to do isn't quite working with what other teams are doing around you. So the benefit is we've got Emery that's a problem solver and a puzzle master. So I think he will have this plan in mind, but any sort of setbacks we have, he will put right during the season. And then when you're thinking that we've got Champions League as well, we basically just need to have a really strong foundation of complementary attributes between the squad, because I think a lot of what we have is good, but not quite enough, especially when it comes to athleticism. It's just been like my buzzword for the summer, because I think defending balls into the box and then winning those 50-50s in big games. I'll lead you on to another player here, Dan, with Onana, because he would be some sort of player to have in that middle.
Yeah, well, first and foremost, I think what we've been looking at in the market has clearly been height.
Yeah.
Barkley is 6'2". Okay, Maatsen's 5'11", doesn't win many headers. Hilling Jr. is actually surprisingly tall.
Yeah,
surprisingly tall. He looks like, when I've watched clips of him, he looks like a smaller player than he's actually listed as. I think he's 6 foot. Berenjay, I believe, is around 6 foot. But yeah, I guess we'll kind of talk about the double pivot a little bit. And yeah, I kind of talked about Berenjay, and if you're getting what you call him Rodri light, Rodri's, I would call him the best midfielder in the Premier League. He was absolutely robbed of that Premier League Player of the Season award. So if you're getting a lighter version of that, I'm pretty pleased with it. For my money, he just turned 23. When he played his last season in Serie A, okay, yeah, the club were relegated. The underlying data would suggest that actually they're fairly unlucky to be. They had a few Emery ball qualities, but just conceded a lot of shots once they played a high press. They conceded a lot of shots once that high press was beaten. But in a lot of aspects, they were pretty mid-table. And if you say, okay, mostly mid-table Serie A team, one of their top two players was the DM, who did most of the ball recycling, most of the ball progression, and a lot of the defensive work in that midfield. How will he translate it over? Can he do Kamara type things? And from what I've read, he was often dropping between the centre backs or even to the right of the centre backs to pick up the ball, a bit like Kamara was earlier in the season. So it seems like he can do some sort of reasonable facsimile of what Kamara was getting for us. And then we've talked about Maatsen, who's another passer. So you've got two passers in that midfield double pivot now. And that definitely helps lessen the loss of Douglas Luiz. So you can because you've got two players who are pretty safe on the ball, you can almost, go with a bit more of a maverick in the middle. And, I would not at this point completely rule out Conor Gallagher. Still, I think he probably wants to stay at Chelsea, wants to stay in London. But I'm now struggling to remember the name of Leicester's new manager.
Maresca.
Maresca. He's not a very Maresca midfielder. No, he's a very Poch midfielder. He's a lot of energy. He prefers to carry the ball as opposed to pass it, although he can pass it as well. He gave the ball up a fair bit. That improved massively this year. So because you've got those two safe options already in that midfield area, you can go. I can kind of go for a bit of a ball carrier, a bit of a maverick who, may well turn the ball over a bit more. And on that, you mentioned Onana from Everton, who has a 22-year-old in a system that does not progress the ball through the midfield at all. He's doing a lot of midfield ball progression and a lot of things that a dice system really it does like. I quite like a dice system, but it doesn't really value a lot of the tools that Onana has. It values his height, his capable defensive ability, which he has, but you see the tools he has as a 22-year-old, like, could that in 2 years' time be kind of a ball carrying, a kind of safe ball progressor slash big box crasher who can use his height to win aerial duels? And you're like, I can see that. If Gallagher isn't an option, if he wants to stay in London, Tottenham are also interested. You could do far worse than looking at Onana as a player. I really like him. Kind of fits the generally under 22 profile of player that we've targeted since Munchies came in.
I think what I'm noticing a lot with this, especially with the market, the way we're approaching it, is it's very unlike us to go for the name player almost. I think Maatsen is probably the most name player we've actually been targeting over the summer that I'm aware of so far. I mean, like, you get the likes of me popping up. Obviously, Gallagher is a name. There's no links at all ready for it, but Dybala was a name. That's obviously appealing to people like me, or other fans that aren't sort of. It's the idea, isn't it? I think a lot of people saw the end of last season and thought, well, there has to be a lot of quality additions. Whereas, I mean, Emery, who probably hasn't stopped working since the end of the season, as much as he wants to pretend he has almost definitely targeted areas of improvement and having. I don't want to call it completely Moneyball, but it almost is, isn't it? With the way that he sort of approaches his system, and he gets players that can get the most out of his system, even for the time being, while he operates around the financial constraints he's got. I do need to say really quickly, Conor Gallagher is a player that I've been spouting for far too long. When AVFC Faithful was a writing post, he was the only player I wrote a whole article for us to buy. I've been screaming out for him on the podcast back when he played a different role. It's one of the few things that me and James have ever disagreed on, and I think he might slightly be coming over to my side a little bit now. But on the flip side of that, not only the way you speak about Onana, Dan, but when you do watch Everton, he is arguably almost the most impressive part of that side whenever he plays as well. So I agree. You can do a lot worse. I am interested now on moving a bit further up the pitch. We do have to talk about, should we call him a sort of a big name possible leave? Obviously we've signed Lewis Dobbin, and it does look fairly likely that John Duran is probably going to leave.
He's basically gone, Duran, now.
Well, yeah, but we say this, and it feels like he's been gone. Has Duran ever been here? Is the question. He pops up every now and again, but I do slightly think he might be a Chelsea sleeper agent, because I never realised this obsession until it was brought to my attention when I think Tanswell mentioned that he liked one of his tweets about Chelsea, and it realised that he only followed Chelsea. It's been very strange, hasn't it? But he's an interesting loss, and I mean, you both will know more than me on this. It does feel like the Lewis Dobbin signing isn't exactly a replacement for John Duran.
No, so I wouldn't be surprised if Dobbin ends up going out on loan this season. We do, like, one profile that I felt we needed to target was a winger. I've kind of mentioned Ilin Jr. I see eventually becoming a left back, but I don't necessarily think we're going to it's another one where it depends on outgoings, but I don't think we're going to spend a lot of money on the front, the front five. Like, I think of the team as a front five and a back five. And Villa were that, last season, and I'm kind of basing it on the entire season there. Villa were a very good attacking team and quite a bad defensive one. When you were looking at the underlying numbers. So if you can, and towards the end of the season, that attack also kind of dropped off because we struggled to progress the ball to them. If you can get the ball to that, our kind of starting attack, we're a pretty lethal team with the way we play. I expect a bit more of Diaby next year. I do like one addition I felt we may have gone for and seemed to have gone for a little bit was a winger who could play on the left side. We only really had Diaby, who was an actual winger archetype type. Diaby's always been a bit more kind of inside half spacey type of player, who wasn't like get chalk on the boots type. So yeah, it does depend on outgoing, but if Duran is the one going, and I don't think anyone pays 40 million for Duran unless it's Chelsea who overvalue youth. Unless it is Duran, who's on about 30,000 a week, and his impact for 30,000 a week is actually really quite good. When I look at the kind of underlying numbers that I want to see in developing strikers, he gets a lot of shots and it gets a fair few of them in the box, and that's a really good sign of a good developing striker. But there's obviously personality things there. I kind of think if no one pays you 40 and there's a personality issue, maybe you see if you can go be the main man on loan somewhere. Like I feel like a sensible La Liga club like an Osasuna, a Celta Vigo or someone like that. Just like, okay, you think you're the big man, go there, be the big man, show us that you can score 18, 20 goals in La Liga, come back, and then we'll see, what we do with Watkins. If we're going to talk about kind of things moving forwards. Unfortunately, Watkins, I think it's going to be good for a few seasons yet, but he's also not getting younger, and you do have a succession plan.
Yeah. And I think we were discussing this the other day, the link to Maximilian Bayer, I think that's how you say it. It's a handy link because I think, as you were saying, you can play that 70-20 sort of role rotation with Watkins. And I'm pretty sure he's also played pretty much across the front three in terms of the areas he sort of played. And he's got the build and the profile where he can be effective, whether it's, a little bit further out or whether it's central. I like what he does on the ball. And in his numbers this season have been outstanding. I think he can make a difference in quite a lot of that final third area. So if you think in succession planning as well, that's a sort of link that I think it really makes sense.
Yeah, we talked about that the other day, whether if Bayer certainly looks more Watkins like than Duran. Duran's quite a different type of striker. Bayer has that kind of experiences and that outside winger. A lot of his touches are kind of in that left half space, but you can kind of, with his build and everything, you can kind of see, okay, you can maybe be a reasonable factor. Again, you can develop into a Watkins type player under Unai Emery. Something before he joined and I saw more of him, I thought Rodgers might eventually be, but Rodgers seems a bit more attacking midfielder. Maybe again with his build, I think he could play as a central striker, but maybe he would be a bit more false niney. Bayer would suit us. You do always have to be aware that he's playing in the, with his numbers that he's playing in the Bundesliga, you're still there getting a fair bit of space as a centre forward. But if you're bringing him in, he's 21 years old. The only if you start kind of giving him beginning of the season, you plan your substitutions. Okay, you're coming on for 10 minutes. Run your ass off for 10 minutes. And hopefully you get a few goals out of that, some good impact. Later on in the season, you can go, okay, now you've got 20 minutes. Go and press, run your ass off for 20 minutes. And that's going to help Watkins as well. Watkins played over 4,000 minutes. He's a very, very fit guy. But you play 8,000 minutes across 2 seasons, and you're starting to worry about, injuries even when you're in the condition that Ollie Watkins did. You start going across 3 seasons, and you start worrying about things like hamstrings, and Watkins is 27 now.
Got
to go north, isn't it?
It might be even 28. And I mean, if you add into the fact that the intensity that we expect to see from the Champions League games as well now, so he's going to be under more pressure this season.
Yeah, I before last season was like, we actually had a pretty balanced squad. It was just unfortunately hit massively by injuries. It's like, ideally you don't want anyone playing more than 4,000 minutes. Like even Emi Martinez, you're playing that many minutes as a goalkeeper. You need to have a lot of concentration. If you're half a second slower getting out to make a sweeping action, which Martinez is absolutely elite at, if you're half a second slow, then that's half a second more a striker could shoot. I think a big part of our, the reason our defense looked in a good last season, we the underlying numbers suggest we didn't concede many shots. The shots we did concede were, pretty high in terms of their chance creation numbers, the XG. Emi Martinez is a plus shot stopper, one of the few consistent plus shot stoppers in the league. He cuts out a lot of shots with his sweeping actions. There's no one else you'd really want to stick in there in a Unai Emery system. But if you're playing 4,000 minutes, and sorry, Emery, maybe you can't go to the Olympics. Sorry, Emery, maybe you can't go to the Olympics because we need you to be half a second quicker when you're up against the wall against a Real Madrid.
It's one of those things, isn't it? It's like it's sort of the pain of beauty almost, isn't it, when it comes to progression in football? Is it does seem that you have to take a lot back moving forward. It was always 2 steps back, it seems, with us. Not in terms of progression, but in terms of in order to achieve it, and it always feels like you've got to lose to get. I just want to quickly, before I forget, because I will forget, a couple of people did reply to the tweet, but funnily enough, you've both covered pretty much exactly what they've asked, which is brilliant. I'm going to say that you both read it. If you didn't, fair play, because it's weird how in tune you both are, clearly, with a lot of the people out there wondering how we're going to set up next year, and especially regarding the signings we're making. Because AVFC Scout asked regarding the left side with Pau Torres and Maatsen's box defending, both have a weakness in aerial duels. So how do we mask that? You touched on it earlier, Dan. I know you mentioned obviously the removal of a Diego Carlos, allowing Pau Torres to actually be at that back post again. Is there anything else that you sort of see what Emery could do to sort of subsidise that?
So I don't worry about it too much if we're playing some sort of if it's a last ditch cross and we're already in our low block. I've already said I think Barkley gets a few more minutes. His 6'2" is actually pretty handy in the air. I think he's probably going to play on the left side of that double pivot. Actually, I think he's someone who could potentially drop back in there for aerial duels if you're, a bit backs against the wall. The concern is kind of defensive transition. Yeah, I think James touched there. Maybe Ezri Konsa is, okay in the air. He's not the best. Mings is coming back, and maybe for certain games, you do see what James suggested there of an outright 3-4-3 formation with Mings kind of playing the outside centre back, or even, we touch on the fullbacks thing. I think Mings might play as a fullback if he has retained any of his athleticism. It wouldn't surprise me. It depends on who, if anyone, we get in as a right back. But I think when you're playing Pau Torres as your left centre back, in football there are trade-offs, and I think you just might have to accept that in order to get all the things on the ball that Pau brings you, you're just going to be a little bit kind of vulnerable to defensive transitions. But because of what he gives you in possession, you're okay. You're happy to accept that trade-off. I think football is about problem solving, but and part of that is accepting what trade-offs you're willing to accept, which ones you're not willing to accept. Liverpool are willing to accept conceding a lot of goals because they're quite confident that they're going to score more with the strategy that they use. Manchester City and Arsenal aren't willing to do that, aren't willing to concede a lot of goals. And as a result, the trade-off of that is they've got to break down low blocks quite often. I think, we just might have to be a bit vulnerable to defensive transitions, and we're adding some height in the midfield. You hopefully have a midfielder, who can drop back it when we're in a low block situation. But it's a little bit of we get more out of possession than we lose in terms of back post headers, maybe. Emery's got to decide that.
But not to interrupt, how much of that also came towards the end of last season, combined with, obviously, Emery won't admit it, but obviously the tiredness and the rotation that came around the squad at that time, and the lack of support from Douglas Luiz, for example, coming in there. A lot of those goals that we did see coming towards the back post or caused by a lack of focus at the back post, it seemingly came more often towards the end of the season than throughout. It didn't feel like a constant issue, is sort of what I'm getting at. It wasn't saying that I wasn't sat there in January going, those back post is an issue, the left back not covering headers is an issue. It did seem a bit, and you're right, the conversation over Watkins, isn't it? The trade-off. People always say, Watkins could score more. If Pau Torres was perfect in the air and perfect with his feet, he would never have signed for us when he did, because he'd be playing for the highest level clubs in all of Europe. So it is interesting. Ethno also mentioned, he does mention, that is genuinely his Twitter handle, by the way. Says, since we have both Maatsen and I'm going to murder the name, Nedeljkovic. I'm going to take.
Sounds about as good as I can do it, so
I'm going to take that now.
There's a K in there somewhere, isn't there?
Yeah, I didn't want to try the K. I'll be honest with you.
I was thinking maybe the J was silent. Nedeljkovic.
Yeah,
I don't know.
That sounds a lot better. We could probably do a full podcast of saying names, and it probably would go quite well. With them both arriving, we would be attacking with both fullbacks or staying with an asymmetric system. We didn't totally get onto this. Obviously, you both mentioned the 3-4-3 system. That's interested me as well, because I've always felt so clever when James taught me that we attacked with the left side more than the right. I felt so clever when he taught me that, and I kept putting it out whenever I went to the pub and spoke to people about Villa. I've gone, obviously, we usually use the left more than the right, which you'll see when we play. So thanks for that, James. So this is why I have these podcasts, and I'm trying to always be here for them, because I just steal both your knowledge and pretend it's mine in little pub settings. It's great. I'm interested to see what you think about
that's what knowing tactics is.
Yeah.
That's all it is.
So I'm interested because obviously a lot of people say with Ezri Konsa what you don't get is going forward. A lot of people say with Mike Cash what you don't get is great quality in both aspects, maybe some would say. What do you both reckon? I know, James, you like chatting about the fullbacks. I know that, so I can get both of your opinions on that. But do you reckon we're going to go back to an asymmetric system, same before, or are we going to go balls to the walls?
Okay, I think it's going to be about having the balance in the squad that you can have the asymmetry on either side, and you can create those isolations. If you have players in that you can put in areas where you can overload to one side and get it out to the other, and you've got a player there that can exploit that. I think it's going to be handy if we can fill out the squad a bit more, that you can find that quality all around the pitch. Really, it's all about solving the space issue, isn't it? If teams press up, wherever they press, sit back, you've got to break that down. I think generally at the moment we're probably still looking at the left hand side with how Watkins positions himself more left-sided, and he is the main threat up top. So I think you're looking to try and get to that area. And that was the area that Douglas Luiz was sort of taking up as well. He tends to sit on that left side, which surprisingly, I actually always thought that his delivery from the right half space was always really good. And I thought we could maybe have got more out of that at the time. But I think with Maatsen coming in currently right now, you're probably thinking, we will try and shift more left side, still dominant. But if we can bring in more players that, you can shift that and then make the left side more isolated, it just helps, being versatile. And it is constantly about problem solving on the pitch, not just, in general. So, yeah, I think it could change. But at the moment, it's still looking a little bit more left side dominant.
Yeah, I'd agree with James. I mentioned, I think Ezra Konsa is probably still going to play plenty of right back. I mentioned Mings potentially playing, at least on paper, as a left back. I'm not. There aren't many teams at the moment, and I do think this tactical paradigm of having 5 guys at the back, which most teams are having at the moment, I do think that might. I think I can see that shifting in the next few years. I think I can see more and more teams kind of going, we'll leave 4 guys at the back and get some attacking output out of it. But with the kind of what I'm going to call 5 guys tactics, generally the shape of that has been 3 at the back and 2 ahead of them. Arsenal towards the end of the season actually did kind of interesting 4 at the back and then Rice in front of them, or Jorginho in front of them. But that's generally what you're seeing. I'm not sure I see a situation where we just have both fullbacks bombing on. It doesn't see and have it leaving the 4 guys at the back. I think Emery in the past has been generally a bit more of a pragmatic coach. I can't see him moving away from the 5 guy system. I can see a situation in which, okay, the 5 guys is maybe a 2 at the back and one of those fullbacks tucking in. James already mentioned Maatsen can his profile can do that quite handily. We haven't mentioned Weston McKennie, but apparently that was the plan with him, that he was going to be starting as a right back and cutting into the midfield double pivot and inverting. So I think we're kind of moving on from the sellable assets thing, but in terms of AC Milan are apparently interested in cash. I'll be honest, he's on, I think, about 80,000 a week. If you can get someone to, pay 22 million, I think you can get those. At least what cash brings you is a lot of physical traits, like good physical traits, and it is not awful on the ball or anything like that. There's just more technical players out there, but I think you can find those traits a bit cheaper in the market than what you're getting out of cash at the moment. So again, it all depends on who can you shift? The data and scouting departments are probably incredibly busy. Like, you're probably looking at every position and going, oh wow, if we were to sell this person, who we get in? Can we find those value? Can we find the same production but cheaper? And in a lot of cases, I think we probably can, or maybe even slightly better production, but cheaper.
It's getting to that point where I think you're looking a bit more forwards as well. I think obviously we're not even in July yet. Sorry, to me the window still doesn't feel open. That's probably sort of why I wasn't checking for any announcements, because it just doesn't feel like we're even there yet. Because it feels like we've got sort of 2 transfer windows. I mean, we're quite deep into this now. There will be stuff I've missed. I'm interested to see if there's anything else you guys have got on your list. James has got a wistful look in his eye that there might be something that we haven't mentioned that he's eager to chat about, possibly. So I'm interested to see. I've used up my notes. The phone has been passed to a side. It is up to you guys. Have you got anything else you wish to discuss tactically or player wise?
Myself, not so much tactically. I think more narratively coming into this. Well, not coming into the season yet, but looking ahead to the season, of understanding what the changes to this squad and what sort of overhaul we could see, what it could mean in terms of where we finish next year. I still expect like a pretty decently strong season, but you're coming into the Champions League, you're going to have more teams that are looking to build themselves back up. Some of the top clubs, I expect Spurs to spend money, and they looked good already. You got United that are under new ownership, doing their own thing now. See what that looks like. I think it's going to be a tough season, where I think European places and a strong enough showing in the Champions League that's respectable. I think we have to sort of believe in ourselves, but temper expectations still, because I think you've got to look forward to the bigger picture, not just this season coming. You're thinking, what's the squad going to look like? Where are we going to be in revenue terms, maybe in 3 years' time? So it's about patience, but also just enjoying this season in general, because a Champions League season hasn't come around often for us, has it really? So just enjoy it for what it is.
Yeah, it might be not that. Yeah, it's been a long time. Can you guys remember how long it's been? It might be like maybe the second time in my lifetime that we've actually. It's the first time we've qualified for the modern Champions League in my lifetime.
Me,
yeah.
So,
It's been the first time that we've been in that top European competition since we won it, I presume.
Yeah. Yeah, like kind of in the modern Champions League. In terms of in the league, I don't see the league was, when you kind of look at the underlying numbers, which I do put a lot of stock into, but you can also just look at the goal difference numbers and see there are very clear top 3 in the league that no one else was even close to. And then you had a group of like 4 or 5 teams, us among them, who were looking for that last 1 or 2 Champions League spots. Is between kind of us, Spurs, Chelsea, and people saw at the end, oh, Chelsea are actually pretty all right. And Newcastle as well. I'm pretty skeptical that United are going to massively improve in the market or improve under Erik ten Hag at this point.
Yeah,
I'm a little bit more skeptical as well with the way Chelsea's squad is set up, and yeah, Spurs' underlying numbers actually weren't all that brilliant, but they have a very consistent plus goal scorer, like over XG goal scorer in Son, and they can rely on that in a way that just very few teams can. So I can kind of see that same group of teams being the best of the rest, and I don't think it's going to take all that much, variance to like for one of them to come out in fourth, be on top, whether that be a good goal scoring season for a certain striker, a bad goalkeeping season, or just a team being hit by injuries. Newcastle won't have European football to contend with. It could be that Chelsea move very well in the market, although they're looking at Dewsbury Hall, who is distinctly all right as a footballer, I feel. So maybe not. Maybe of Ange becomes a little bit more pragmatic, or some of Tottenham's younger signings like Sarr or Udogie really fly off the mark. So yeah, I can kind of see that group of teams again being the best of the rest. I'm not overly convinced by a United revival as yet. Crystal Palace were kind of up there towards the end of the season. I've watched a fair bit of Glasner being in the Bundesliga, being here in Germany. Is a pretty good coach. Palace, and if Palace can keep that front three together, which it seems like, actually no, probably not. Eze looks like he's going. Yeah, I'm not sure anyone else gets in there really. I'm not sure if anyone else really has that quality. But like you said, there's a Euros happening right now. The only deals that are happening are because clubs are, have PSR troubles and decided maybe we do some financial crime adjacent things. Villa contacted Chelsea. How do you guys feel about us being the center of all of this? It seems like we instigated all of this when we called Juventus, and Juventus are just like generally pro-crime. So that was, I think that was like the reasoning there. It's like, who do we know that likes crime? I'll get on the phone to Juventus, and we can see what we can do there.
Yeah,
how do you guys feel about us kind of being the center of that? I'm really not sure how to feel.
I have been like partly wound up and partly amused by it all, and like I think there's a lot that the Premier League are looking like they seem to be doing something without actually doing anything anyway. And then also sort of happy to see us doing this, because there's plenty of clubs that that can pay ridiculous amounts of money and get away with it, and we're finding our way around it as it is, and forcing these potential rule changes and whatever. And I just think we're willing to be creative in these sort of activities. So
creative in like a Del Boy sense.
Yeah. It's I think it's football now. I was thinking yesterday, I was at the gym and I just thought, I actually miss being like 11 and just watching football for football and not being involved in the politics side of it. So yeah, it's just been like, since the end of the season, this whole PSR thing's been almost draining, really. So I'll be quite happy when the football's actually back in terms of domestic level.
Sorry, Dan, just to clear up there. It's just I'm so on with James there. It was so difficult to sort of not spend every waking minute. I work. I have a life, but I wanted to spend all my time arguing with people over financials of a club that I support, and then almost justifying our association with, like you said, arguably the most corrupt team in Italy, and then with the team that everybody hates at the moment in Chelsea, because they pretty much signify everything wrong with football. And then we're siding with Man City in certain aspects against the Premier League, and it's like, well, I don't want to do this.
Are we the baddies?
Yeah, it's exactly that. It's getting to that point now where this shift is coming, and Newcastle fans have felt the exact same thing, and then we laughed at it, and then we're sort of doing it in. Let's not get it wrong. Very different sort of bad feeling about it, but you're sort of like, no, now we're doing it. It's okay, because we know how it feels to be shat on all the time, but it is so it's not dodgy. But then when the Juventus deal came out and they were like, oh, and Alicia Lehman's obviously going as well, you thought it was like, oh, this really is not starting to seem right, Villa, and it's not starting to seem like the club. But football's changing, and as you get older, you become a bit more aware of the things, and you like football isn't, rosy gold and 30-yard screamers and stuff like that. There's a lot of stuff in the background. You got to sort of just, put your feet up in the back garden, have a nice cool glass of lemonade, and try not to think about it.
It's just so complex that I can't get my succinct feelings across of it constantly because I've got too many points in my head that I want to point to, and it's just like I just want to be able to be talking about asymmetric 4-4-2.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But football is better when there's football being played. As much as I kind of enjoy the speculation of squad building and stuff, but it's better when football's being played and you're not kind of okay. What kind of financial skullduggery are we getting into this week? Hopefully that's over at least for another year.
Is it back here same time next year?
Yeah, back here same time next year. Villa, our lifetimes, Villa have always been a nice club. People have always, you tell people you're a Villa fan, I like Villa, unless they're a Wolves fan or something, but I like Villa. Kind of like being I don't mind being the baddies, on the pitch a little bit. I don't mind now that we've got players with a bit more attitude, like Emi Martinez.
Yeah,
Baron seems like he's got a bit of an attitude. John Duran is a walking red card. I don't mind that a little bit. It's kind of nice. It makes a difference.
Just don't want to go too far the other way.
Yeah, you don't want to go too far. We don't want to become Chelsea, but
Yeah, but like we always say, until someone tells you you're doing something illegal, you're not really, are you? And as someone will rightly point out on Twitter, of course, it's not a million miles away from murder, apparently, doing a swap deal. So, but hey, I guess it must be nice being able to sell hotels. The problem is that we're getting to a point now where we've had 2 days where there's been no Euros football, so it's all I've thought about now. And we're going to have it again when there's a break in the Euros, and then the Euros ends, and I've got to watch the Olympics in order to swell my brain from all of the panic. But pre-season can't come soon enough, really, can it?
No, I love pre-season just for. I always love watching the academy players that you sort of dip in and out of the squad, and you see, I wonder what they could be capable of in 2 or 3 years' time, maybe a bit more. And you sort of see different ideas implemented, and it's also a great time because it's the peak of summer. I think the pre-season time and just heading into a new season around that July, August, start of September time. I love that sort of feeling of football being back. So yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, I always enjoy the first few weeks of the season, and the very premature takes on. We've got very limited time. What take's going to have on this? And as James says, that those kind of pre-season games where you find a youth player, and we're probably a bit late now to get into by Cameron Archer takes, and I've got a few, but that's a nice pre-season surprise. Maybe there's another one this year.
It can go too far though, and I've managed to already wind myself up about the international breaks that start next season. So, see, they come back around. We can be in the middle of the tournament, and I'm still pissed off about them. Look, there's going to be so much coming up. I wouldn't be surprised if we do another one of these in probably about 4 weeks' time, because there's more than likely going to be a lot more movement. There'll be a classic Villa signing as well that sort of comes out of the blue. That we don't really see sort of happening, hopefully as well, because it is very painful watching them be drawn out. That's the only problem with us going up the level, I think, is watching these transfer deals play out for 4 weeks, because I feel like I could spell Douglas Luiz and the whole transfer saga out perfectly now, because it feels like it's been going on a bit too long. But look, I can't believe it's been over an hour. You can tell it's been a long time. Look, I think it's been brilliant. Dan, can you just let people know where they can find your stuff, please, mate?
Yes. So, I mean, the best place to find me will be on Twitter. So it's 1874 underscore Pridge, or just type Dan Pritchard. If you follow Dan or James, I'll probably show up in their replies at some point. But yeah, that's where you can find me and the stuff that I will hopefully do when I finally finish my thesis. All the football writing that I've got listed on my phone that has gone unwritten for a while.
And obviously, the beauty is, if you're watching this as usual, you should already know me and James. But if not, if it's your first time, everyone's links, mine, Dan's, and James will all be down below. And of course, the original AVFC Faithful posts themselves, they'll be down there as well. If you did enjoy, please like, subscribe, and hit the bell as well. It's a new season, James. I'm not gonna be inappropriate this year. I'll give it 2 weeks. There will be a lot more coming up. There's a couple of changes happening behind the scenes with the podcast as well, which will me and James are trying to sort out, and we'll get in touch with you when those have formulated as well. So all that's left to say really is up the Villa.
Up the Villa.
Thanks for having me on. Up the Villa.